Now, this sort of set the tone for the next conversation. We're looking at the latest report from the International Energy Agency, which indicates that the recovery from COVID-19 pandemic and the global energy crisis has led to a significant increase in clean energy investment. Between 2021 and 2023, investments in clean energy have risen by 24% compared to a 15% increase in fossil fuels. Now, in 2023, it's estimated that approximately $2.8 trillion will be invested in energy. Of this, over $1.7 trillion is allocated to clean energy. Chinnan Dikwal, energy expert and vice chair, African Energy Council, joins us to unpack this. Chinnan, good afternoon. According to the IEA reports, for every $1 spent on fossil fuels, $1.7 is now spent on clean energy. 5 years ago, this ratio was 1-to-1. What factors have contributed to this rapid increase in clean energy investment in such a short time? Can you tell us?
Thanks for having me, Will, and an absolutely important question here. So the clean energy wave has been happening for a while. It's not been very obvious for lots of people, but I think you go back to 2015, there was a massive increase in clean energy investments after the downturn, the oil downturn of 2014. And you're absolutely spot on. At the moment, for every dollar spent in fossil fuels, about 1.7 is being spent in clean energy. The reason for that is very simple. If you look at most of the clean energy technologies today, they've seen a rapid increase in their efficiencies, okay? You take solar, for instance, it's gone from about 12% efficiency to 22, around 24 today. You look at cost of solar, it's been 90% down in the last 10 years. So 90% shave off of the cost in the last 10 years. Wind about the same. You've seen also a massive learning curve, so costs have come down. So the whole point here, Will, is what's been driving it? What's driving it is that these clean energy technologies are reaching cost parity with fossil fuel technologies, and that's starting to become very attractive. That's why we're seeing a massive resurgence. Now, outside of that, of course, the thing people know so much is this clean energy agenda and all the noise around it. Yes, that's part of it, but the reality of it is from a technology standpoint, these technologies are seeing a seismic shift. From a cost standpoint, they're becoming way cheaper. From an efficiency standpoint, they're becoming much better. So these are the things that have driven it, to answer your question pointedly.
No, so how is the policy, because I was looking at the report and it's saying that how has policy support such as U.S. Inflation Reduction Act influenced the trajectory of clean energy investments?
Great question again, Will. The reality is, so if you look at the U.S., yes, there is the Inflation Reduction Act. You're 100% right, but let's be very clear. The Inflation Reduction Act also has healthcare in there, so it also has mechanisms for healthcare, also has mechanisms for revenue generation, for tax breaks, and of course clean energy. I think the real winner here is actually the EU Green Deal. The US are moving in clean tech, correct, but they're not the leaders in there. They're more laggards in that space. They're still investing massively in fossil fuels. The real winners, the real people driving innovation, new technology in green investments, is actually the EU. So you go back to the Green Deal, the EU Green Deal released in 2020. So they started with, the EU Green Deal. It gave massive tax breaks from a policy standpoint, put lots of, key levers that enable investors to come in and invest and R&D to happen. And that's led to a very positive outcome for clean energy.
So what are the implications of this? I'm just, trying to think about countries that depend on fossil fuels. What are the implications of this shift for countries such as Nigeria? We saw that report where you're saying Nigeria needs to start refining more. But what will happen if this shift keeps going on? What will happen to countries like Nigeria who rely on fossil fuel?
Absolutely. Thanks for that question. So this is the catch, and I think this is where Nigeria needs to listen very attentively, okay? You go back 10 years ago, you go back 5 years ago, fossil fuels in terms of their pricing, much lower, renewable energy cost, and, clean energy much higher. Today, we're seeing cost parity. So these are starting to reach cost parity together, okay? So from a cost standpoint, they're starting to compete. What that means ultimately is if you look at our markets in Europe and the US and parts of Asia, lots of these markets are moving away from fossil fuels into clean technology. What's an example? You look at electric vehicles. You go back to the UK today, there are laws that say by 2035, much of transportation will be electric. Go to Europe, exactly the same. So what that means for an oil supplier like Nigeria, here is this, that if we're not careful, a lot of our oil supplies will end up being stranded. They'll go into international markets and there'll be no buyer for them because that whole segment of transportation has been electrified. And this is where the thinking hat, our thinking hat, needs to be on as a nation. Lots of the regulators need to start to think, what can we do? How do we start to diversify? How do we start to invest in clean tech? What needs to happen from a policy standpoint? There's a big risk that as an oil supplier, we might lose that position. And of course, there are alternatives. Hydrogen is really massive. The EU is a demand center. We can take advantage of that and start to ship hydrogen into Europe. We can take advantage of a renewable energy boom and increase the penetration of renewables in our energy mix. So there's several things that we can do, but I think we need to wear that policy and thinking hat.
Thank you so much. We do need to wear that thinking hat. It's time to, put the right policies in place and implement them. Very important. Thank you so much, Chinnan Dikwal, Vice Chair, African Energy Council, for sharing your thoughts and perspective on the program.
Thanks for having me.